Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose. And, if there's a theme for the game industry in 2024, it's that nobody's safe. It's just not a healthy industry right now, and that's mostly across the board. We've seen that with Xbox this year. That has been loud and clear. We've seen it with PlayStation. They cut a bunch of jobs as well. They canceled some games. They closed the studio. And we've also seen it among various other studios. Studios are just shutting down. People are losing their jobs, and companies are announcing missed targets after missed targets. Well, we can now add Square Enix to that list as well because they just announced their own disappointing results, which has led them to a bold new strategy that will turn their ship around and maybe get them back on track, or at least that's their goal. So we're going to go and get into this entire situation today, as well as some interesting Switch 2 news and also a game reveal that I think a lot of people will be pretty happy about. Make sure to stay tuned for all that. Also, make sure to subscribe, but yeah, let's just go and get right into the Square Enix stuff. Now, I will say, as a fan of a lot of Square Enix games, especially being Final Fantasy, I think it's disappointing that it's even come to this for Square Enix to realize that their business decisions over the past few years haven't exactly been great, because this is something that I've been talking about on this channel for years. This is not like some huge surprise or anything like that, but the fact that they've acted as a sellsword, if you will, has now caught up to them. They've basically been a mercenary for Nintendo, and especially for PlayStation, with a lot of their games. And while I can understand that with some of their smaller IP to a degree, in my opinion, it just never really made a lot of sense for something like Final Fantasy. Square Enix has now released 3 back-to-back mainline Final Fantasy games as PlayStation exclusives. And over time, it's become evident that this has been in detriment to the Final Fantasy franchise. And that's why I care so much about this topic. Final Fantasy is among my favorite franchises ever made, and I want to see it grow, and more importantly, I want it to sustain itself for decades to come. So the problem with exclusivity for a franchise like Final Fantasy, in my opinion, is because it's already popular. It does not need that exclusive tag to get a bunch of attention for it. It doesn't need that exclusive tag for some short-term check. And that's really the thing about this entire deal with Sony. I mean, sure, PlayStation probably signed a nice, sizable check for Square Enix to get the exclusive rights for Final Fantasy. But my question has always been, is that really what this franchise needs? Do you really just want that one-time paycheck for one of your most important franchises? Not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but hopefully for years and years and years. Because to me, I think the more important thing to do here is to grow that franchise across all platforms. Build up your PC fan base. That way, when you release Final Fantasy 17 or 18 or 19, it will have a larger group of people that will be interested on that platform. You can also say the same thing for Xbox. Build the Xbox fan base. And when you can, because I know that hasn't been the case for the past 7 or so years, but when you can, build up your Nintendo fan base as well. Right now, though, Final Fantasy's popularity is kind of lopsided because they keep focusing on just one singular platform, being PlayStation. And that problem has caught up to them. This has been such a controversial topic over the last few years, and I think it's kind of ridiculous because so many people aren't looking at the full picture. Yes, with each Final Fantasy game, it sells millions of copies within just its first month. But if you actually look at it, Final Fantasy is on a downward trend. That is a fact. If you look at it, since the release of Final Fantasy 15, which interestingly is the last completely multi-platform title, each mainline entry after that has sold less than the one that released before it. And no matter how you slice it, that's not exactly a great sign. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people claim that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or 16 has been these huge successes because they've sold millions of units within their first month. But that's not how this works. We need to go one step further and look at how they stack up compared to their previous releases and what their expectations are for this next entry. And if you haven't noticed, not only are these Final Fantasy games selling less each time, but the expectations for AAA games since the release of Final Fantasy 15 has gone way up. And the proof of that is the ballooning budgets that has infested the AAA game industry. Now, maybe games have just gotten too big by this point. I don't know. But what I do know is that if Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was more expensive to make than Final Fantasy 15, but it still sold less, well, mathematically, that's not particularly a great sign. The idea of investing more money into something is that you're going to get more in return, which is not what we've been seeing when it comes to the Final Fantasy franchise. Well, now that Square Enix has new leadership, they've come to see the light. They've decided that their exclusive strategy with PlayStation just hasn't been paying off and that they've been limiting themselves too much. I'm not saying this. They're saying this because check out what they just announced today. They announced a new, more aggressive multi-platform direction that focuses on quality more than quantity. You can see here they said their mission is to diversify earnings opportunities by strengthening customer contact points. They said that the goal is to shift to a multi-platform strategy for HD titles. The group will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs, especially in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. It will build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles. In addition, it will also devise a platform strategy for SD titles that includes not only iOS and Android, but also the possibility of PC launches. So, I mean, you can kind of read between the lines here. I mean, there was already a lot of evidence that Square Enix will support at least Xbox more going forward. The writing has been on the wall pretty much since last year when Phil Spencer appeared on stage with Square Enix, where they vowed to support Xbox when they can. Now, they didn't exactly name any names there, so, does this include Final Fantasy or not? Who really knows? But this here, I would say pretty much cements that yes, this does include Final Fantasy as well. If you read between the lines, this is them essentially saying that, yeah, it was our mistake to keep Final Fantasy as an exclusive PlayStation franchise and that you should no longer expect that in the future. For me, I'm now positive that they will work to port Final Fantasy 16 and the 7 remakes to all platforms. Now, how long that takes, we'll kind of see about all that, but I do expect to see those games on all platforms eventually, and this does also include future entries, because I believe those will now launch simultaneously as multi-platform releases, including, interestingly, Nintendo as well. Now, I've mentioned this before, but for as much talk as there's been about an Xbox version for these games, that's great and everything. I'm happy for all those Xbox fans out there, but for me, I view the inclusion of Nintendo as potentially even more important for Square Enix and Final Fantasy. No, these games probably are not going to run on the Switch. We all know that. But the Switch 2, however, that will be out next year in 2025. And if there's any way to get these games running on the Switch successor, that will be massive for Square Enix and the Final Fantasy franchise. Now, the main reason I say that is because of how popular Nintendo is, specifically over in Japan. So, I think Square Enix and Final Fantasy needs the Switch 2 to really push them to that next level. Either which way, though, it's been a long time coming, but I am happy to see that Square Enix, has finally wised up here, and, now we can just kind of expect to see these games on multiple platforms going forward to where they can hopefully grow and sustain themselves for years and years to come. Alright, now speaking of Nintendo, though, a Switch 2 game has seemingly leaked a little bit early, and I think a lot of people will be really happy about this. But it also does bring up a very important question at the same time. We'll come back to that here in just a moment. But what's happening here is that Midori, which we've talked a lot about her on the channel, she's proven to be a reliable leaker in the past, but as always, kind of take this with a grain of salt until it's 100% proven. However, according to her, Nintendo is working on a new project codenamed U-King-O, which is actually very interesting in this case because we do have a pretty good idea as to what this stands for. Interestingly, Zelda Breath of the Wild's codename is U-King, so we can safely assume that this new project is somehow related to Breath of the Wild. Even more is that it's also been pointed out that for Switch ports, Nintendo likes to add the suffix -s to their codenames. So with that information, logically we can kind of discern here that -O could potentially be for a Switch 2 port. In other words, we could get a native version of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch successor with higher resolution and better frame rate. Now, this isn't necessarily a guarantee, But if you think about it, this does kind of add up to what we heard about last year after Gamescom. There were a lot of different reports at the time that Nintendo revealed a couple games behind closed doors, including an enhanced version of Breath of the Wild running on a Switch successor. So, I mean, by all means, it does sound like that this remaster of sorts does in fact exist. If so, though, I mean, my question really just becomes, is this going to be a brand new release where we have to pay retail price, whatever that may be? Or is it going to be like some kind of $10 upgrade? I mean, we see PlayStation do that a lot. Or is this going to be more like what Xbox does, where certain games are just automatically enhanced at no extra price when you play them on the Xbox Series? Now, obviously, that would be a more consumer-friendly option, but at the same time, this is Nintendo that we're talking about, so I'm definitely going to go ahead and take a wait-and-see approach. Either way, though, I mean, if you like Breath of the Wild, it sounds like it could get a whole lot better on the eventual Switch successor. Now, lastly, we do have a game premiere to look forward to this week, and that's for the next Assassin's Creed. You can see here, Ubisoft announced that Assassin's Creed Codename Red becomes Assassin's Creed Shadows. Tune in for the official cinematic world premiere trailer on May 15th at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. So, okay, unfortunately, it sounds like we won't get gameplay here, which is too bad if that's true, but at the very least, we will get to see our first glimpse of their take on a samurai Assassin's Creed title. I mean, this is a setting that fans have requested pretty much since the original trilogy, so, it's finally happening after all of these years. Now, this is also going to be handled by the Assassin's Creed Odyssey team. I know out of the modern Assassin's Creed games, that one is viewed in high regards, so hopefully that translates to Shadows as well. I guess if anything, we'll see here soon enough. Anyways, that's going to be it for this episode, but do let me know what you all think about all of this. Are you looking forward to the next Assassin's Creed game? What do you think about Square Enix vowing to aggressively go multi-platform? And also, what do you think Nintendo will do if they really do have a Breath of the Wild remaster? Will they charge for it or not? Until next time, though, peace out.